Hey race fans, welcome into another episode of Backseat Drivers. I am Alex Weaver, and today is going to be a special episode because I'm going to have the usual cast of suspects here on Backseat Drivers with Kim Kuhn and Jonathan Merriman. But guys, we have a special guest today with Bob Pockrass and NASCAR on Fox. Bob, we're excited to have you here. Welcome to the Motley Crew.
I'm excited to be on, although you guys are a tough act to follow. I don't know if I'm going to be able to live up to what you guys have all been talking about all these weeks.
I think you might know more than we will. So we're going to get into this what if segment that I know Fox is doing. It's a really cool segment that basically sets up all these scenarios that what if didn't happen? How would that have changed the history of NASCAR? So you guys ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So first up, I want to know if Jimmie Johnson had never joined Team Hendrick. So let's say that Jeff Gordon never met Jimmie Johnson. How in the world would NASCAR be different?
That's a great question. I think Jimmie Johnson goes and runs for another team. Which team? I don't know. And then who goes into that 48 car if it's not Jimmie Johnson? You know, Greg Biffle was a rising star at the time, and I know Jack Roush would have done everything he could to keep him. But I also know Rick Hendrick probably had a big checkbook at the time to try to get whoever he wanted. And Greg Biffle probably was the biggest star, up-and-coming star at that time.
I don't know who takes Jimmie's spot over at Hendrick if he doesn't end up there, but I think Jimmie probably would have ended up at a Team Penske or a Roush Fenway had he not landed at Hendrick Motorsports. Would he have had the success he had at Hendrick? Likely not, because I think the pairing with Chad Knaus was really what drove all the success that both Jimmie and Chad had.
I don't know. I think you can look down the road at Hendrick and you can draw a lot of what ifs out of this. You know, is Kyle Busch at Hendrick Motorsports, and is he, kind of valued a little bit more? And does Rick try to keep him there? And you look down the lens, who knows where Jimmie ends up? But one thing's for sure, I don't think he's got 7 titles without Hendrick Motorsports and Chad Knaus. It's their numbers are unbelievable.
Well, we know that him and Gordon work together as teammates. They now are, facilitating that relationship at Hendrick and really building that company for the young stars that are rising now at Hendrick. But would they have been competitors if they weren't teammates?
They were competitors even when they were teammates. You saw in the video that they certainly went at it a little bit, and I think they would have gone at it even more. I think Jimmie would have won a championship or 2 or maybe 3, not 7. But, don't forget, Jimmie Johnson, he made it look so easy, and he was so great at handling a loose race car. And, yes, him and Chad Knaus certainly created magic, but I still think Jimmie would have certainly had a full trophy case full of hardware and at least a couple of rings on his finger, even if he wasn't at Hendrick Motorsports.
I certainly think if Jimmie and Jeff weren't under the same umbrella and Jeff wasn't responsible for Jimmie coming over at Hendrick, they have no reason to be cordial to each other. And to Bob's point, we saw sometimes some tiffs between them over at Hendrick. So I think if they ended up at separate teams, they could have been one of the greatest rivalries in NASCAR history because of the talent each of them had. And they would have been battling, again, on separate teams. And there would have been a little bit more intensity, maybe a little bit more animosity between the two. So it would have definitely been interesting.
This is where it gets fun, right? Because, in the documentary, it's like, well, what if Chad Knaus goes to the 24? Does Jeff end up winning 7 championships? I do think Jimmie, without Hendrick Motorsports and Chad Knaus, is championship talent. But one of the people I think that it might benefit more than anybody in a rivalry that we might see kind of, flamed up a little bit was Tony Stewart, Jeff Gordon. If you look at Tony and Jeff, when Jimmie came in and started winning, those guys were also at their peak. And Tony bookended Jimmie's, 5 straight championships. So I think Tony Stewart's numbers could be huge. And I think, even though Jeff was born in California, he considers himself to be from Indiana as well. I think you could have, 2 Indiana superstars coming from the open wheel dirt world, just beating each other on Sundays. Would have made for a heck of a show too.
All right, so we go from 7 championships to a driver who never won a championship in the NASCAR Cup Series. So, Bob, let's say that Mark Martin won the championship in 2009. How different would his career have been?
Well, then everybody would not know who to compare Denny Hamlin to, right? But yeah, his career would have had that title. Would Mark have continued racing more? I don't know, but I certainly think that it would have, I don't want to say it would have solidified Mark Martin as one of the greats because he was already one of the greats. He would just not have that, but yada, yada, yada at the end of every one of the conversations about Mark Martin's career.
I think we actually would have talked about Mark Martin less if he had won a championship, because so often we talk about him being the greatest driver to have never won a championship. And then drivers that, are in the ranks that get very close, like to Bob's point, Denny Hamlin, get compared to Mark Martin. So I think without a championship, we end up talking about Mark Martin even more so than if he was just a one and done champion, like so many others in history. Not to say that winning a championship isn't a good thing and he would have preferred it. But again, I think he gets more conversation had about him because he never did win a championship for how good he was.
When you go down the list, I mean, when you talk about Mark Martin, you also talk about Denny Hamlin, to Bob's point. You also talk about Carl Edwards. And through that 5-year stretch, they all finished second to Jimmie in the championship standing. So, maybe that's a conversation maybe that's never had but with any of those guys. So it would have been a lot more parity, I think, when you go down that list through that 5 championship, run span. We could have had a different champion every single year. But it's certainly something to think about and figure out where people would kind of shake out in the history of the Cup Series.
Well, all three of you teed it up. So let's get into Carl Edwards and Denny Hamlin, because if they would have picked up that first championship in 2010 and 2008, what would be different?
Well, I would think maybe Carl Edwards could still be racing. A lot of people think that, one of the reasons why he left is kind of frustration over this system of it coming down to one race. So, and as far as Denny Hamlin goes, I think there wouldn't be the questions, is he going to, is Joe Gibbs going to decide at some point they don't want Denny Hamlin anymore, is what happened a couple of years ago. That those conversations probably would never even happen because you'd be like, well, he is a guy who won a title.
I disagree with Bob. I think if Carl wins the title, he still ends up retiring, goes out on a high note, having won a Cup championship. I don't think it changes whether or not he leaves the sport. On the Denny side, I think if he had won early a championship, we actually probably would have seen multiple championships already from Denny, because the monkey would have been off his back. He just would have been in a different mindset. Once you've won one, it opens the gate a little bit to understanding what you need to do to win multiple championships.
All right, Bob. Well, you're still doing it, so there must not be an age limit to how long you can walk around the garage. We appreciate you being here. Welcome to the Honorary Backseat Drivers Club.
Thanks. I hope I get to come back again.
Yeah, guys, you can watch all the What If segments on NASCAR.com and on NASCAR on Fox. It's sure to be a good one, setting up these scenarios of how NASCAR history could have been different. And all of us are on social media. You can @ all of us. If you disagree with anything, if you want to see us talk about anything else, you can find us all. But direct them towards Bob if they're mean, right? All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you right back here. Make sure you tune into New Hampshire. It starts the month of August for the NASCAR Cup Series, headed into the playoffs. You got to get through New Hampshire. That's 3 p.m. on NBC SN. We'll see you guys right back here on another episode of Backseat Drivers.